Okay. We need to talk about this. You know what Pokémon is, everyone does.
So Pokémon is a game that teaches children how to enter into the world of witchcraft, how to cast spells, how to use psychic phenomena.
No, seriously, everyone knows. Even your grandma can identify all these characters as Pikachu. Come on, Grandma, that's Charizard. We went over this! When Red and Blue were first released in, these years, it took the world by storm. You gotta catch 'em all, right? That's what the adverts all kept saying back in the 90s. It was clear, it was addictive, it sure as hell drew me in, and it was a very satisfying and relatable goal that translated well from marketing into the games themselves. Though, looking at where the series is now, it's hard to tell if the Pokemon of today really is the same as what we grew up with. As we celebrate Pokemon's 25th anniversary, what better time to break down the mainline series of games and look at it objectively than now? No, really, you know a better time? Go ahead, suggest the time. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there and hash it out. Just the two of us. Have you ever played a game and loved it so much that you wanted more, but then the next game in the series just didn't live up to your expectations? Like, it looks the same, sounds the same, smells the same, but something just doesn't hit right. A lot of game developers, particularly in ye old times, often took beloved franchises and used them as an opportunity to test the waters for something new. Sometimes they pay off, and other times, But as with anything in life, change is scary, and making something new is a risky endeavor. If you try to change something people like or are accustomed to, they get upset. Where the fuck is Mewtwo? When you think of a sequel, you think of a continuation or an expansion. You take something that already exists and you say, what else can be done under this already established pretense? For video games, it's a chance to refine an experience by cutting redundancies for a smoother romp, and also potentially adding new features that intertwine with the existing gameplay and context. Or so you'd hope. Wasn't going fast enough for this loop? Go back, take a run up, back a bit more. A bit, I don't have all day, come on. Or I can just spin dash! Woohoo! Suddenly the complexities of this single bit of gameplay have been simplified. But it also presents new opportunities that break the limitations of the initial game. The game now needs to accommodate these new gameplay mechanics if it's to retain the high-speed action of the first game that everybody loved. And attempting to do so is a risk. You're messing with something I love here, man. How can we take something that people already love and make changes that won't cause a hindrance on the things people loved about it in the first place? Simple answer is, you don't. And Pokémon is a perfect example of this. For the first 16 years of Pokémon, you play as a mandatory white kid. The game's still the same today, but now you can be black. What do you do in Pokémon? I'm sure you all know this. Run around catching dangerous monsters, go beat the gyms in Elite Four. Maybe there's a bad team trying to steal Pokémon and you gotta stop them. Maybe there's a bad team trying to take over the world. Maybe there's a bad team trying to teach you the ethics behind forcing creatures into balls and making them fight against their will. Wait, what? Then why are you doing the same thing you're against? When did these stories get so convoluted? I'm just a kid wanting to go on an adventure and all of a sudden I'm expected to save the world? This isn't any of my business, man. I just wanted my own Pikachu. Well, whatever, that's the story. We're more interested in what you actually do. You know, like how you play the game. You have an overworld filled with Pokemon, you gotta figure out how to track them down. There are branching paths and secret areas with some puzzles along the way to flex them brain muscles. It's mostly a relaxed game, nothing demands any kind of execution from the player, you just move around and press A. When you're ready, I don't want to rush you. And because of that, there's not really any way to fail in the overworld. If you can't figure out a puzzle in Team Rocket's hideout, it's not like you get a game over and gotta start from the beginning. You move around on a set grid and can only move in 4 directions. X and Y finally let you move in infinity directions with the roller skates, but the map was still fundamentally based around a grid. It wasn't until Sun and Moon in 2016 that this grid was finally abolished. So it feels more modern with today's games, but the new layouts and movement options don't actually make any substantial difference. In some ways it's more of a hindrance on classic Pokemon overworlds because all the whooshy 3D graphics means all these new camera angles and perspectives that are forced on the player make exploration much less intuitive. The focus is sort of taken away from the player and how you played Pokemon in favor of a more cinematic storytelling. But ultimately, you still traverse the map in the same way, and the gameplay still takes you through the same motions. It's like buying a new game, but when taking a closer look, you realize it was a game you already had, it just now has a new coat of paint. So what changes have been made that actually affect the core gameplay? Well, the other thing you do in Pokemon is battling. Most interactions in the game inevitably lead to a battle. If you're friends with someone, you battle. If someone's a farmer, you battle. If someone threatens to take over the world, you don't call the police. No, you just throw a little ice cream at them. I think it's safe to say the focal part of the game is battling, and the overworld is more of a hub for preparing yourself for battle. But the main change from Pokemon is, of course, the new Pokemon. But let's take a moment to really grasp what this means from a gameplay perspective. See, in Red and Blue, you walk into the grass and you find a Rattata. But in Gold and Silver, you walk into the grass and you find... Woo! But in Gold and Silver, you walk into the grass and you find a Sentret. The Pokemon is brand new to this game, but the method in which you found it and captured it is exactly the same. While the overworld has a new map and new secrets to find, it all plays out in the same way. The key difference to look at here then is that Sentret has different implications within battles. It has different stats and moves to Rattata, so the way you approach the battle portion of the game is now different. The process of battling is still the same, but now you have to adapt your strategies to accommodate all these new Pokemon. Nothing here is inherently different, there's now just more of it. In this regard, I feel Pokemon does a perfect job of keeping what people loved about the game intact, while still adding more. This is what I like to call accumulative game design. The concept of taking the previous game as a base and simply building on top of what was already there. Often you'll find sequels are the same conceptually, but the mechanics of the gameplay are vastly tweaked and attuned to new features. But with such a rigid and unwelcoming to change foundation, it makes sense for each iteration of Pokemon to be copy-pasted every time. And that's not always a bad thing. I mean, why fix what isn't broken, right? If the formula works, why risk making big changes that could ruin an already pleasant experience? It's like going to a restaurant and ordering your favourite dessert. You could eat it every day, but then one day the manager comes over and says, "Hey, we got 2 new desserts, cake with cherry on top, and mystery cake." You could try the mystery cake, see if it's any good, but it's a lot to risk when you already know you like regular cake. You don't want to ruin your meal, cause a commotion, and be banned from the restaurant when you could just have the same thing, but with a little something extra. But here's where Game Freak really went wrong. If Pokemon Red and Blue is this, then Pokemon Sword and Shield is this. The overworld and battling has functionally remained the same, and each iteration only serves to bring in the next set of new additions. But that's all each cherry is. An exponential increase to the same formula, stretching it out as much as possible. The developers continue to build on the quantity aspect without really focusing on how it might impact the existing quality of the overall experience. And here's why this is a bad thing. All the additions made throughout the series aren't exactly integrated into the core mechanics of Pokemon thoroughly, especially not into the single player campaign. They just sort of feel tacked on, like a kid in arts and crafts who got a little too carried away with the glue and... now he's eating it. Oh, what am I going to do with this boy? Pokemon games have always been somewhat easy, but there's a difference between an easy game and what's essentially an interactive cutscene. Take jumping in Mario, for example. All you gotta do is press A to jump, right? But in practice, it's a dynamic interaction, taking into account momentum and the obstacles around you. It's such a simple, easy thing to do, but it creates movement that feels fun and satisfying to pull off. And every Mario feels different and unique in its own right, because they're constantly trying to improve the experience, or tweak the mechanics to better fit in overall with the objectives in the game. In Pokemon battles, you just press A. That's it. 25 years of pressing A. Whether the characters are advancing the plot or I'm in a battle, there's no thought process, I'm just mashing the A button. In a turn-based game, there needs to be more strategy involved, and the Pokemon games have never really pushed that side of things beyond type matchups. The core challenge to battling revolves around a rock, paper, scissors kind of deal, with 18 different types. Essentially, you just gotta use the right moves against the right opponents, and you win! Scissors made of steel obviously beats the rock. For returning fans of the series, this part of battling is almost to its detriment, because if you know the type matchup chart, then there's not really much of a challenge. In most other RPGs, the challenge comes from identifying enemy weaknesses, strategizing how to abuse that weakness, and then the rest is like an endurance test in managing your resources. In some cases, you're even given actions to perform to try mitigate unique enemy attacks, which helps keep things fresh and engaging. The challenge for newcomers to Pokemon was learning these type matchups, but since Sun and Moon Generation 7, the game even told you that! The game doesn't encourage you to experiment or try to figure out what type any new unknown Pokemon is. The AI doesn't exactly try to bait you to pick the obvious choice like a real gamer would, so the game might as well just say, "We're button here!" If I'm fighting Gyarados, who's 4 times weak to electric, with a Pikachu, the AI opponent will never, and I mean never, switch to something else. Throughout the course of 8 generations, 25 years of games, I'm not a complete idiot for thinking this, right? One of the biggest fundamentals of the game, switching to the most favorably typed Pokemon, is and always has been a one-way street. And from 1990 whatever to 2019, this just hasn't changed. Knew I'd be aiming for super effective? Then why didn't you fucking switch? It's not like he didn't have anyone else to go to. He has a flying type, which is immune to ground. Even when new mechanics were introduced, abilities, double battles, triple battles, mega evolutions, Z moves, no matter what's been added, the game either refuses to take these into account or uses them once, maybe twice, and never to its full potential, which just feels like a waste. There's 3 enemies here, why am I fighting them one-on-one? Why is this not a triple battle? Often you'll see people talking about the problem with Pokemon, or changes they'd like to see, but what they describe is essentially wanting a different game, changing Pokemon from what it is. People have found so many gimmicks and setups in the game, which shows the series has plenty of variety. Why not make use of this versatility in the actual games? Make generic trainers force you to use your brain and learn the intricacies of the game so they're actually a joy to fight, rather than just mandatory EXP for the player, which makes the game easier. Make it so catching a wide range of Pokemon with different moves and abilities a necessity for overcoming certain battles and strategies, which ties in well with the ethos of catching as many Pokemon as you can. Mix things up like they did with Emerald Battle Frontier, where a different battle style was given to each frontier. Anyone remember the Orange Island League from the anime where Ash had to use his Pokemon to overcome different trials? How cool would that be? And no, I'm not just talking about the Alola trials where you just... I don't even know what's going on here. It's just so goopy. Some might argue that the series got easier, more saturated, and less good as it went on, and that may be true. I think we all have different points we started to dislike the series. With the growing battle system not accounted for by the AI, it makes sense that more options just means a more laid-back adventure. I mean, 99% of trainers don't even have a full team for Arceus' sake. But if we look at the games objectively, the accumulative design of the game, at its core, continued to build. As the generations went on, the number of editions may have decreased, but it was always more. That is until we get to Sword and Shield. Pokemon Sword and Shield, as part of the mainline Pokemon franchise, is the technical decline of the series. In terms of quantifiable core gameplay mechanics, Sun and Moon are the peak of Pokemon. Every time a Pokemon game introduced some new core mechanic, the next one would always follow through and retain these features until Sword and Shield. Like the game has barely scratched the surface on itself and it's already cutting back. But hear me out on this one, cause it ain't all bad. Now, for a series that continually builds on itself like a schooling wishy-washy, yes, that is the name of a real Pokemon, I think trimming the fat is actually a good thing. It's a step in the right direction for a more tailored, refined experience, and it shows the developers actually care about how the game is played, rather than just dumping the next lot of new stuff on top in an incongruent fashion. It's a chance to improve other features, rebalance the game, and in general, re-explore what the franchise has to offer. Except that's not what they did. There are many articles of Game Freak trying to explain the cuts were for balancing purposes and to improve animations, and as we all know, this just isn't the case. Just look at it. This is a straight up lie, because the best animation we've seen from Pokemon was the Post Malone virtual concert, and God, I wish I could catch my own Post Malone. And the balance reason doesn't make any sense because the game is still ridiculously easy, especially now that EXP share is permanently on. From Generation 6, the player starts with EXP share that gives experience to all Pokemon, presumably in an attempt to reduce the need for grinding, but the player had the option to turn it off if they wanted more of a challenge. So it was there in X and Y, and it was there in Sun and Moon, but Sword and Shield, it's not there. Hey. Balance! To remove a yes-no option doesn't even contribute to the balance. They could have still balanced the game around the default yes, and just included the no for hardcore fans. This may seem like a petty thing to quarrel about, but it also seems petty for them to remove such an easy-to-implement feature for literally no reason, especially when it was there for the past 2 generations. It's like they just said, no, you're playing it how we want you to play it. So they added new Pokemon, but still reduced the Pokédex down to 400, which obviously makes sense for balancing purposes. I like to think Game Freak were meticulous in their cuts, really considering what Pokemon you find on your journey, when you find them, and how they can be used against the game's AI. That's what I wanted to believe, but then they made DLC, which brought back 174 of the previously cut Pokemon. And when they introduced the Pokemon Home service, which allowed you to transfer your old Pokemon from previous games over to Sword and Shield, another 80 could be brought back, including select starters, but not Diamond and Pearl starters, how interesting. And pretty much every previous legendary Pokemon. And those legendary Pokemon are definitely not balanced for the main game, no siree. At what point do we go from adding more content each game to cutting content and lying to fans about it? For a game series like this, I feel it's okay to cut stuff out if it's for the benefit of the game. In some cases, developers don't necessarily have the time, and that's okay, but for the highest grossing, most popular multimedia franchise that have been using what are essentially the same models since 2013, it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up! It's gotten to the point where patched-in sleeping animations are newsworthy. They did it. Game Freak fixed the game. Fuck it. See ya. And let me tell you something, okay? You see this? You see this right here? 1998. 23 years ago. The final Pokemon in the standard Galadex is Eternatus, who, by the name, is meant to represent the concept of eternity, and they made it a poison dragon type, which I think is a brilliant precursor to the following DLC and the future of Pokemon. Eternatus' Dynamax form is even a hand reaching through a portal, like Game Freak is literally just smacking the game around how it sees fit. Game Freak are the eternal poison to their own game, and if this precedent continues of cutting content with the faux promise of a more refined or changed game, then us fans are in for a real bad time. To put all this into perspective and perhaps try to identify where things went wrong, let's take a look at how the developers approached the remakes of the series. In an Iwata Asks interview, Heart Gold and Soul Silver's developers had this to say: "We've been greedy in the amount of gameplay elements we've squeezed in there. There's so much included that I even had colleagues saying to me, 'Are you fucking serious?' In that sense, it's not simply a remake. I think it's more than that. For that reason, I would like to see these games enjoyed by as large a number of people as possible." And it shows in the final games. Everything is accounted for. 16 gyms, 2 Elite Fours, the final battle with Red, following Pokemon, the Poke Walker, Pokeathlon. Go! Fucking go! Win it for Papa! And while on the subject of not including Battle Frontier into Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, even though it was in Emerald, in an interview with Italian Nintendo network Pokémon Millennium, the developers had this to say: "We created a balanced game." Yeah, okay. Just give me the summary. Interviewer's note: in short, he means that they didn't include the Battle Frontier because only a very small part of the players would have fully appreciated and made use of this feature. Nowadays, players get bored and frustrated more easily, and they aren't interested in things that are so demanding/challenging. Don't worry guys, they're not lazy, they just think you're an idiot. That's like saying the game will eventually end, so may as well stop working on it now. Maybe if they put in the effort to include Battle Frontier, players wouldn't be so quick to drop it. The absolute contrasting differences here just astound me. But is this reflected in sales? Well, if we take a look at this graph, can we really blame Game Freak for being as lazy as they are? Yes. While it is a business, video games, along with films, music, and other media, is another form of art. And I think it says a lot about a company that clearly no longer cares for the art of something and striving to lower the bar for bare minimum with each iteration. In an ironic twist of events, it seems like the franchise is starting to devolve itself. From a quantity perspective, they reached the peak with Sun and Moon and are now beginning to cut back on many of the things they added with no real benefit behind it. So what's next for the series? Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. And look at it! They've essentially regressed back to the 2D style we haven't seen since Black and White 10 years ago. I can't believe it's actually happening, and it's working. And oh yeah, okay, it's a remake, but even Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire wasn't this regressive. How long will it be before we eventually return to a Pokemon with only 151 Pokemon and everything else is just cut? Well, at least until they release the DLC for it. As a little something extra, I feel like Pokémon Legends Arceus needs to be addressed. This is more what I think the entire Pokémon community has been hoping for from a new Pokémon game. Now, it doesn't look like a mainline entry, more of a spin-off made by a different studio, which is promising, and the trailer doesn't really show us much, but at the same time, I think it speaks volumes. I know it's early days, but let's be honest, it's not gonna get much better than this, is it? Bare, empty wastelands filled with nothing, a deserted town, Chingling running at negative FPS. Don't be so pessimistic. It will be better, they say. But given Pokemon's track record and everything we've covered today, having literally no expectations from Pokemon isn't enough. I usually expect nothing, yet I'm still surprised because they don't even deliver that. I'm calling it now. The final game will not be much better than what we're seeing in this trailer now. If anything, it will be marginally better, and because of that, fans will be okay with it. When a shit product looks good, but you realise it's shit, it's easy to be disappointed. But when a shit product looks shit, and ends up being marginally less shit, it's easy to mistake it as being a lot better than what we thought it would be, and feel like an effort was made. But hey, I hope I'm wrong. I still love Pokemon and want to believe it will someday leave behind its dated roots. I know I've made it seem like I'm out to get Game Freak or Pokemon or something, but honestly, I'm sure the Diamond and Pearl remakes will still be fun because, well, it's Pokemon. And that's kind of the point I wanted to make with this video. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with Accumulative Game Design, just that Game Freak hasn't really done it justice. Like, every generation still feels the same as the first game in the series, not taking full advantage of everything they've accumulated thus far. Though, just because a game is largely the same with each iteration, doesn't make it any less fun. In fact, quite the opposite. Just take a look at FIFA or Call of Duty. Gameplay is pretty much the same every year, but hey, a little something new is a good excuse to revisit a fun experience, and there ain't nothing wrong with that. Thanks for watching. Are you in a love-hate relationship with Pokemon too? Let me know your thoughts on Pokemon in the comments below. If you want to see me shit all over another beloved franchise, stay tuned for part 2 covering Animal Crossing. In the meantime, why not check out some of my other videos? Hopefully they'll make you laugh too.